जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भवतीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। इस मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अवतीत ध्यान कर लो। सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर, सबकी आत्मा आनंद का सागर, सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर, सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर, सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा शक्ति का सागर है, सागर है, सागर है। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भवतीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भवतीत ध्यान कर लो। गुरु साक्षात् परम ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। शंकराचार्य
Jai Gurudev. We welcome all of you for today's session. The last class we have completed chapter 2. So this class we will have a recapitulation of whatever we have learned throughout the chapter 2. Before we go in and have a complete summarization of the chapter, may I request the Vedic Pandits, Tiwari ji, can you please recite verses 71 and 72 of chapter 2?
I don't see any
Yes.
Pandits, Madhavi.
They
Do you want to do 71 and 72 or?
I will do it, Hemaji. No
Okay,
issues.
good. Go ahead.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. अथ द्वितीयोऽध्यायः सांख्ययोगः विहाय कामान्यः सर्वान् पुमांश्चरति निःस्पृहः निर्ममो निरहङ्कारः स शान्तिमधिगच्छति येषा ब्राह्मी स्थितिः पार्थ नैनां प्राप्य विमुह्यति स्थित्वा स्यामन्तकालेऽपि ब्रह्मनिर्वाणमृच्छति हरिः ओम्. Hemaji, may I request you to summarize the chapter 2 for us?
So today what we are doing, Mataji will summarize the first half of chapter 2 and then I will do the second half. Jai Gurudev, Mataji.
Jai Gurudev, Hemaji.
Okay.
Jai Gurudev, Madhavi, and I don't know who else are there. Let us see. Some other people are there. Sachin is there. One happy girl is there. There is a Manju and Bani and so on and so forth. So, chapter 2 is a very big chapter, 72 verses. And as Bhagavan Krishna has given, this chapter is the soul of the Bhagwat Geeta, while all of those that follow form the body. So I will just, bring it in a very nutshell only, because after having listened to the whole chapter, the most important things are, this is a great blessing, this chapter, because it brings hope and fulfillment to every seeker. Arjuna here is like the seeker. Every seeker that is out there, Arjuna represents that. And so it brings great hope and fulfillment to every seeker. And to every seeker, it shows the path, it shows the direct way to a peaceful, energetic, and successful life in the world, together with the spiritual comfort and, in addition, freedom from bondage. So you are achieving everything. There is the comfort in the material world, and there is comfort in the spiritual connection, and there is freedom from bondage. And it expounds Brahma Vidya in its completeness. Now, what we have seen with Arjuna is, Arjuna, the seeker of the truth, is held in a state of suspension because he sees no solution to the basic problems of life. He thinks there are too many problems in life. And, but from the point of Bhagavan, there are no problems at all. And he says, only the impurity in the mind and the intellect overshadows the dignity that naturally belongs to life. So, to Arjuna, the seeker, the teaching from Bhagavan Krishna gives insight into the life itself. What is life actually? And here Bhagavan Krishna goes into great detail telling that there are two aspects of life. One is the ever-changing body, the mind and the senses. And then there is a never-changing or the unchanging self. So, in the second chapter, we begin to realize, or we understand completely, that until being is realized, life is without a stable foundation and remains based solely on the fundamental problems of existence. So here the crux is that one has to have the self-realization. And knowing the self and being the self brings equanimity in the mind. And then this equanimity is made permanent by gaining this absolute consciousness with repeated transcendence. That means, you gain the cosmic consciousness. So here, the most important thing is the mind gains the absolute consciousness naturally and easily for the one who is transcending regularly and who is living a dharmic life and a sattvic, way, daily routine and food and all that. But for the man who is immersed in only sensory enjoyment, he misses it because he doesn't go beyond the senses. For him, he is only there in the senses and the sensory objects. That is his fulfillment. So here Bhagavan Krishna and Maharishi Ji has brought out this technique. The technique is given, and the technique allows the mind to arrive naturally at absolute consciousness, and then, having become acquainted with the fullness of life, to engage in action. So here there is the transcendence, gaining familiarity with the transcendent, the being, and then coming out and engage in action, because that consciousness then affects the thought, the actions, and the speech, which are the three karmas, that for everyone is engaged in throughout the day. This chapter further gives the advantages along with the technique, which are improved efficiency in life, there is greater success in all fields of life, relief from the everyday problems and the innumerable problems, and then complete liberation from bondage. And then Hemaji will cover this more. This chapter will go on to describe that if a life is established in equanimity and the intellect is established in the self, then this freedom or this Jivan Mukta status is completely established. Freedom from bondage and freedom while working, freedom while thinking, this freedom is completely, liberation is completely established. And so this is life in cosmic consciousness. Mostly, here we in this chapter, Sankhya Yoga, most of it is covered in the cosmic, up to cosmic consciousness. And I just want to add a few things here. Maharishi ji, from the very beginning, he begins to say, the self-realization is the most important. And I gave these Gita talks about 3 times in the last 4 or 5 years, or even maybe 7, 8 years, And there are these usual questions, simple questions that come out. Is self-realization an experience? Self-realization is not an experience because for convenient terms, you can say self-realization is an experience, but it is not an experience because there is no experiencer or the experience there. So there is no knower, and then that, the process of knowing is not there really. So it is beyond that. So, and in Telugu, in Sanskrit, we call it Atma Sakshatkaram, which literally means self-revelation. That means the self is revealing itself by itself to itself. There is no other second element is not there. So only when you go beyond all that is relativity, because we understand now very clearly after going through the whole of the Sankhya Yoga, that just as the absolute we say is infinite, so also is a relative is infinite. Absolute is infinite, relative is infinite. Relative from its gross to subtle to subtle to subtlest is also very infinite. So the transcendence can be on from that gross to the subtlest and beyond seem to be a long journey. And in reality, it seems like a long journey. It seems like a never-ending journey. But this arduous journey is made very straight and short by the presence of a guru. Because he cuts short the path. So that, and then once when one is realized, has reached that and had the self-realization, then one knows that there was really no path. Where is the path? It seemed like that. But in reality, there is no, it's a pathless path. And so when the self is realized, then it is revelation, then it is realization. What is this realization? That you are not limited, you are unlimited. You are not bound, you are unbounded. You are not finite, you are infinite. You are not the ever-changing phenomena, but you are the never-changing phenomena. And you are not the decaying and the degenerating, but you are the immortal soul, Atma. And this is the realization. Revelation, revelation is infinite, all-pervading. Infinite, all-pervading. Nobody can describe that. One has to have that experience to know it, because nobody can describe either the transcendental consciousness, which is the Paramatma alone. So first we begin with Paramatma, knowing the Paramatma as that infinite, all-pervading. And then when this is established and this absolute consciousness, goes more and more into the relativity, and it is established, and the self and the non-self are established side by side, then when we say it is the cosmic consciousness, then even that is not understood. Neither is the God consciousness understood until you're there. Now, it seems like, how can there be self and non-self in the cosmic consciousness? It is there. It is there. The self is always there. The non-self is always there. The self becomes the witness of the non-self, and everything that is going on in the body is watched by the self and knows the self. The self in the omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent self knows everything that is happening in the non-self. And and the two have to come together. And when they come together, that will happen in God consciousness. So these stages are not understood until one gets there. You cannot talk about it. You can only know it, and they are not experiences. Now there was a few people, because these were very intelligent people when I had these talks, and they were asking the questions, that can we have the experiences of the higher states of consciousness? Yes, just like the glimpses of the Atma come, when a mother is looking at the baby, all of a sudden the mother is lost in looking at the beautiful face of the baby, and the full transcendence comes. The same way when the painter is doing the painting, or the sculptor is doing the sculpture, or the artist is doing, some other in the nature or something like that. But, these are glimpses. They are not established. In the same way, even during the transcendence, this different states of consciousness are experienced like previews. Like you have movie previews, like that, you would see this, this cosmic intelligence, this, the divine feelings, the expansion of this love and the compassion, and, this infinity that you're feeling. You feel those, but these are not lasting. But in the states, when they come, they are a state. Existence changes from the waking, dreaming state, sleeping, to the cosmic state, from the cosmic state to the God state. The existence completely changes. The platform completely changes. Life completely changes. So it is not on a preview level or coming and going level. It is established existence. So now what has Maharishi Ji done? If some people will ask, is TM alone sufficient to gain the self-realization and to gain the liberation and happy, free from bondage? Maybe, if you are like Shankaracharya, or if you have the nervous system like Maharishi Ji, maybe that is enough. But for the most people, it is not enough, because, we are too thick in the world, and too much engrossed, with the samsara, and too many problems around. And so it is bombarded. The nervous system is continuously bombarded and continuously stressed out, and continuously keeps gathering impressions and karmas and samskaras. And so, so Maharishi Ji has also given a way to it. He has given the siddhis and the advanced techniques. And then he brought out, regular retreats. I went to a number of retreats on a regular basis. At least once a month I used to go for a weekend retreat, and sometimes for a weekly retreat. At least twice a year or once a year I would go for a weekly. We used to call them WPA, World Peace Assembly retreats, where, there is a lot of rounding done, and you're in that environment, and you can become very, very, go very, very deep, transcend much more deeper and deeper. And there Maharishi Ji would organize, very, very sattvic food, very sattvic environment. And just, you're staying there in the silence, receiving the knowledge, and then they doing the sadhana. So these are important to establish even in India now. I think, the retreat should be there on a regular basis, wherever there are centers. And so I think that would answer some of the questions, that would come up. So our only thing is, Maharishi Ji says very clearly, you have to be on that very deep silence level, very deep silence. The nervous system has to experience that very, very deep silence. That silence is there, then the peace is there automatically. They go hand in hand. But only in that very deep silence, then, that Atma will reflect. Because the Atma is one, the self is only one. And it is reflecting on the nervous system. And it is reflecting on this nervous system. And when there are these shadows, it's overshadowed because of whatever impressions, or because whatever, situations there, stresses or whatever it is, then a veiling is there. And then this is not fully prakasham. Fully it is not, it is not reflected. So this full, now in order for this full reflection to happen, which is the Atma Sakshatkaram, the self-revelation, and followed by the self-realization, which happens simultaneously. Then he said, there has to be that infinite deep silence. And, in this samsara, to get that infinite deep silence is very difficult. So you do need this forest environment or, silent retreats, and you need the finality of those things. So here, Hemaji, I will end here and you can continue with whatever. Okay. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. Thank
I
you,
know
Mataji.
we're dealing with the infinite subject here.
Yes, that's true. And thank you for explaining about the Sankhya part of the Sankhya Yoga. We will take a brief pause and take any questions from the audience. If not, I will continue with the yoga aspect of Sankhya Yoga. Any questions for Mataji?
Yeah, yes, Hemaji, Jai Gurudev.
Jai
Oh,
Gurudev,
Anita
Anitaji.
is there. Yeah, she will have questions.
Yeah. Mataji, I am not, I have not been to a retreat as such,
Yeah.
but I just wanted you to know that, like Maharishi's, we know from the guidelines that from New Year's, that for myself, I keep silence from 1st to 4th of January every year
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
past 3-4 years.
Yes.
So,
That is wonderful. Yeah.
right. I don't do it for 7 days, but I do it for 4 days, 1st to 4th. And you'll be surprised, my house runs better than I was running when I was talking so much and taking care of everyone. And everybody told me don't do it on the 1st because we have a lot of guests for the New Year's and a lot of greetings from elsewhere. So what I do is I hand over my mobile to my daughter-in-law, and if she's not there, to my husband. I don't answer calls. I don't even use WhatsApp. I
Yes.
enjoy my 4 days with myself. So that
Yes.
is a self-retreat for myself.
Yes, you have to, as a seeker, the path, you will be the charioteer. You will be the
Yeah.
chariot. You will be able to see where you need to do what, how you need to move forward, and how you need to do further sadhana. You will be the only one who knows. How will anybody else know?
And Mataji, once the
Yeah.
call was answered by my grandchild,
Yeah.
and she said that you can't speak to my grandmother. And
Great.
the person at the other end said, why I can't speak to your grandmother? I am her sister. Then my grandchild said, but she is in silence and she cannot talk to you whether you are a sister or not.
This is
So
so cute.
my sister took so much of offense. She says, you train your children so badly, they don't let me talk to you. And then when I explained to her, so it was just to share with you that I have my own self-retreat.
No,
I have never been ever to a retreat like that, except of course for a TM course, which we've thoroughly enjoyed. But
Yeah.
that's it, Mataji. Thank you so much.
You're most
Lovely
welcome.
listening to you.
No,
Thank you.
you need those retreats yourself and keep training. If you have only one grandchild, keep training her. It will be.
No, and they are so
She'll-
particular. And
Yes.
Mataji, they are so particular. They will not be because unnecessarily. And I have seen the house was running pretty well.
Yeah.
And why the hell I was involved in all that nonsense? Nobody asked me what is the menu. Nobody asked me anything. Everything was going on perfect. And I had a great time cleaning my cupboards, doing my meditation, reading Bhagwat Geeta, enjoying myself and taking, time out and telling my husband I'm in silence. So I can't. And then, sometimes I did make gestures, but I never spoke. I
Yeah.
had that control.
No,
I
that
never spoke.
culturing that silence, culturing that nervous system, time to time is important. And even if, once a week, one day a week also, you can be, be in silence and do your rounding. And, you make big strides. So where there is no support system like this, having the retreats and all, then you create your own structure and you have your little grandchild who is like Nandi.
Yeah.
Like
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. It gives me a feeling that I can start once a month at least.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for the idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Jai Gurudev.
So what Anita ji, brought up, she brought up a very beautiful point. She said the household was running very efficiently. So this is a realization for us that nobody is indispensable.
Right.
The word goes on. But sometimes we think that, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. If I don't do this, who will do it? How the household will run? So it's a very beautiful, revelation.
Yes,
That I'm not indispensable. I can go my way and take care of myself, and the world will continue to run the way it is, maybe even better, like Anita ji said. So,
that is because, Bhagavan is also, the grace is coming. He starts removing the obstacles, also if there are any there. So the grace is also coming.
Yeah.
So he also wants to make sure that you are doing your program. And he says like Nandi, he will say, okay, I'll watch you. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So now we will move on to the second part of the second chapter. And this knowledge about yoga is brought out in verses 39 to 53. They give us the teaching of yoga, the path of union, which is a direct way to experience Atma. So in this section, we come across the most important shloka in Bhagwat Geeta, which is 45th verse. And it is most important because it gives us the technique of self-realization. Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvastho Niryogakshema Atmavan. The Veda's concern is about the three gunas. Be without the three gunas, O Arjuna, freed from duality, ever firm in purity, independent of possessions, and possessed of the self. So what does that mean? Vedas tell us about gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. And these are born of Prakriti. But because Atma is beyond the three gunas, these gunas are in the relative, and Atma is beyond the three gunas. So, Sri Krishna Bhagavan is telling Arjuna to go beyond the three gunas and be without the three gunas. Then you will experience Atma. Then you are Atmavan. You possess Atma. And when you have that is self-realization. Like Mataji used the word Atma Sakshatkaram. That's what exactly it is. And now this is the connection between us and Paramatma. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Here, what we see happening is the technique of introducing the second element is there. Now, Arjuna is complaining about problems, and Sri Krishna Bhagavan doesn't pay any attention to that. He just ignores. And then he tells Arjuna to transcend. He says, there is no problem. What are you talking about? So here in this technique, we bring in the light to remove darkness. If there are problems, we go beyond the problems. The problems are in the relative life. And so we go beyond the relative, we go to the absolute. And in absolute, there is no problem. And that's why in the shloka, the word used, it is Nistraigunyo Bhava. Be without the three gunas. And this is the direct means to take a man to Atma. So I'm sure all of you know about the gunas, but I will briefly recap. It's good to be very clear about gunas because in subsequent chapters, we talk about gunas a lot. The entire creation consists of interplay of the three gunas. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and they carry out the process of evolution. What is evolution? Evolution means going from a lower state to a higher state. And at the basis of this lies activity. Because there is movement, you are moving from a lower state to a higher state. So there's some action is there. So quality of sattva is purity, peace, harmony, balance, and positivity. Rajas is passion. There is activity, there is drivenness and dynamism. And tamas is dullness, laziness, anxiety, there is negativity, and it is ignorance. The force that takes the process of evolution to a higher state is satoguna, sattva. And the force that retards the process is tamoguna, because there is laziness, there is dullness. And so all the three gunas have to be there. No one guna can exist in isolation. So that's why Arjuna was asked to be without all three gunas. And when you're transcending, when you're going beyond, then you experience the silence of Atma. Atma is unity. Atma is one unbounded ocean of consciousness. People who came early heard the song sung by Horilalji. The lyrics are written by Maharishi. And Maharishi said, Sabke Atma Shanti ka sagar hai, Jnana ka sagar hai. So it is an ocean. It is an unbounded ocean of consciousness. That is what Atma is. When you have the experience of that, that means you have self-realization. You know what you are. You know who you are. And that's why this shloka becomes the most important one in entire Bhagavad Gita. So now what happens? You have realized yourself. Then what happens is interesting. 4 things happen that are mentioned in the shloka. The first one, it says nidvandva, that is freed from duality. That means you are going beyond duality. Just now I said Atma is unity, and relativity, we see multiplicity, duality and multiplicity. And so in relative, it can be a field of conflict because there are so many things are going on always. So because of that reason, the duality becomes the cause of suffering. So there can be suffering in the relative because of duality. There are 2 things. That was Arjuna's problem. There is his highly developed intellect and the highly developed heart. 2 are there. 2 are separate. And there is no harmony between them. So that caused a big problem for Arjuna. So Krishna Bhagavan is telling, go beyond the duality and then experience unity. And so that way you get relief from the problems of duality. You get freedom from stress and frustration. And this is important because one is affected by the outside influences as long as one is out of oneself. Very important. Hear this again very carefully. One is affected by outside influences as long as one is out of oneself. And one is in the sphere of relativity. When you are in the relativity, you are influenced by what is in the relative. And so somebody says something, you feel bad. Something goes on, something in family, somebody is not doing well, then you feel depressed. So you're affected by all this. And so that is why by having the experience of unity of Atma, we find relief from the problems of the world. So that's the first and most important benefit we have once we have the experience of silence of Atma. The second thing that happens is we become firm in purity. The Sanskrit word is Nitya Sattvastha. And in order to grow in higher states of consciousness, this purity is very essential. And the third thing that happens is when one reaches the state where one is not required to think of gaining what one does not have or of preserving what one has. So all the time people are trying hard, to get something that they don't have, more money, more of this, more of that. And also they're trying to preserve what they have. And the Sanskrit word used in the shloka is niryoga kshema. And this eagerness to acquire what you don't have and to preserve what you have, this can cause problems because we have seen that Duryodhana's greed to possess and preserve possessions is the cause of battle. He was not happy with the kingdom that his father gave him. He wanted Pandava's kingdom also. That greed, got him in trouble. And he goes for war and he loses. And so the lesson that is learned is that when you're happy with what you have, then you don't have any greed because you're content. And so in this state of self-realization, and then you progress from there to higher states of consciousness, this contentment is an essential ingredient. You are content. And so you're not running around to get things that you don't have. And the next and the last thing mentioned in the shloka, the fourth benefit is you become Atmavan. You possess self. So what does that mean? That means just like you own a house, you own your Atma. That means you have your house, you have Atma, you experience it. Your Atma is there with you. And then you get Atmananda. So when all these four things happen, then you lead life in fulfillment. So it is this experience of transcendence which enables one to become a karma yogi. We'll talk about that in our next session. That is, we begin karma yoga next week. So the basis for karma yoga is transcendence. And the basis for bhakti yoga is also transcendent. For jnana yoga also it is transcendent. So the technique of transcending and experiencing self is the basic experience. Based upon this, all the other different paths take off. And so experience of self is the highway to fulfillment of life's purpose. This is the basis of success in any field of life. Doesn't matter what is your profession, what you do in life, doesn't matter. Everybody wants to be successful. And so the basis of success is this field of transcendence. And as a result of this experience of transcendence, the field of three gunas in the relativity, that field is enlivened by the light of pure consciousness, which is beyond the gunas, which is underlying basis for the gunas. So then we come to the next shloka, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Ma karma phala heturbhuhu ma te sangostva karmani. So here, what this means is you only have control over action and not on the fruit of action. So this does not mean that the action should be done without caring for its result, because it is the anticipated fruit of action that induces a man to act. You want to get something, so you do action. So what does this shloka is trying to tell us then? this shloka is telling us that the result of action will be greater if the doer puts all his attention and energy into the action itself, instead of thinking about the result of the action. Because if you're thinking of the result all the time, you're distracted. You're not focusing on the action. And of course, we all know that the result will be according to the action. So it's good to focus on action. For example, if the student is preparing for the exam, then the student should focus on preparing for the exam and not think about, I hope I could get good marks, and then I hope I get into engineering college or medical college, and then I become a great doctor, and then I'll make a lot of money. So if the student sits and daydreaming about all these things, you're not really preparing properly for the exam, and the result may be that you may fail in the exam. So we don't think too much about what will happen after the test. We just focus on action, and that's what it means. We have control over action. So then now we move on to the second most important shloka in Bhagavad Gita, and that is verse 48. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Established in yoga, perform action. Having abandoned attachment and having become balanced in success and failure, for balance of mind is called yoga. So in this shloka, in the first line of the shloka, there are two instructions. First is yoga stha. Stha means established. Yoga means union of mind with Atma. Atma is divine intelligence. So the first instruction is be in union with Atma, which is the ultimate reality of life, and which is a storehouse of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. That means it is an inexhaustible reservoir of energy, intelligence, and happiness. So the first step is we get established in Atma Yoga Stha. Second step is to come out and act. You have the experience of Atma, then you come out and act. And the Sanskrit word is Kuru Karmani. Kuru means do action. So then when you experience the inner silence, then you bring the energy from that into the action. And then what happens? All your actions are fruitful and they are successful. And then you get nature support. Why you get nature support? Because you are getting in touch with transcendental consciousness, Atma, which is the home of all the laws of nature. It is like going to a president's office and he treats you very well. And then all his staff is seeing that. And when you come out of his office, all his staff is very friendly with you. And whatever you want gets done immediately. So it's like that. You get familiarity with this inexhaustible reservoir of energy and intelligence. You bring it out into activity and your actions will become successful. So here, the mechanics of successful action are given. And what are the mechanics of successful action? Maharishi gives a beautiful example. He says, pull the arrow back on the bow before shooting it. Then it will hit the target. Why? Because you are building up potential energy by pulling the arrow back. So here, pulling the arrow back means transcending. And shooting the arrow means action. So here, the philosophy and purpose of Karma Yoga is explained. The whole philosophy of Karma Yoga is to bring the divinity of Atma into the relative life, so that every thought, word, and action of yours is divine. And this is the biggest blessing. And then because you are bringing this divinity into relative life, life is lived in waves of joy. Life just becomes a joy. So now, just like we have talked about the rewards of getting into transcendence in the 45th shloka, here also there are rewards for getting established in Atma. And what are the rewards? Number one is the mind, the individual mind, grows to cosmic mind. It's like a small businessman becoming wealthy. Now he has, big business. It's like that. So the individual mind grows to cosmic mind. That's the first reward. The second is with transcendence, you experience yourself as separate from activity, because when you transcend, you are going beyond the finest relative. And when you go beyond, the activity is separate from the self. You experience yourself as separate from activity. Then you have Atmananda and you are content. And so you're not attached to anything in the relative field. And this is indicated by the Sanskrit word in the shloka, Sangam Tyaktva. Sangam means attachment. So go beyond means you go to the state of non-attachment. In the relative, you are attached to things. So when you go beyond that, you have the state of non-attachment. And this is not a state of a dry, state. This is a state of fulfillment, because when you go beyond and experience Atma, you experience fulfillment. So that is the second advantage. Another thing that happens when you experience yourself as separate from activity is the actions do not have the binding influence. Why? Because the actions are in the relative and you are in the absolute. So there is this separation. And so whatever is happening with activity, that is not having any influence on you because of the experience of separation from activity. And so these actions do not produce any impressions on you. Because when they produce impressions, then the seeds for future actions are sown, and then this becomes a cycle. There is action, there is impression, there is this impression. When the time comes, again, it becomes a desire, and then the desire will prompt you to act. So it's a vicious cycle. It goes round and round. And by transcending, we break that cycle. And so the impressions are now become less and less, and then you will not be having the seeds for future actions. So that's another very big advantage. We come out of the binding influence of action. We will talk more about it. If anybody did not understand, no worries at all, because in third chapter, we will cover it again. And the fourth advantage is that one becomes balanced in success and failure. This word balance is very important. And by transcending and experiencing, self, one becomes balanced. And it is said in this shloka, the last word, it says, balance of mind is called yoga. So here, balance is called yoga. In the first shloka, that is in 45th shloka, union is called as yoga. And here in this verse, balance is called as yoga. So as you can see, these two shlokas give us tremendous knowledge. And now we will move on. So, so far, what Mataji and I have talked about was about the two aspects of Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya is the theoretical aspect of the knowledge, and yoga is the practical aspect. Just like when you went to college, first they teach us theory. For example, in chemistry, they tell us this and this, how to make copper sulfate and all that. They explain theoretically, and then you go in the lab and you put copper and sulfate together and you produce copper sulfate. That is the direct experience of what you studied in the theory. In the same way, in Sankhya, we get the theoretical understanding of two aspects of life. One is the absolute, the other is the relative. The basis of relative is absolute. What is absolute is Paramatma. It is never changing. It is always there. It is Shashvata. It is eternal. So that aspect is the underlying basis of life. And so we got the knowledge of relative and absolute in Sankhya. And in the yoga part, we got the knowledge of the direct experience, how to directly experience that absolute that had been explained in Sankhya. So the knowledge of Sankhya was given in the verses 12 to 15 of second chapter, giving us the wisdom of Sankhya. And in the verses 45 to 48, we got wisdom of yoga. So these two sections, they are the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And everything else in Bhagavad Gita is the extension of these two sections. They elaborate on, these two sections. So now we come to the practical benefit of this knowledge of Sankhya and Yoga. That is the state of Sthita Prajna. And this is described in the last 18 shlokas of the second chapter. So what are the qualities of a Sthita Prajna? What is he like? The first shloka, 55th shloka, it tells us that the one who is a Sthita Prajna, who has a steady intellect, he's satisfied in the self. He's happy with the self through the self. Atmanyevatmana tushtaha, by the self. And because he's happy, he is happy with what he gets. Yadrushta labha santushto. Whatever comes, he's happy with this. And for that reason, he has no desires. And why is it important not to have desires? Because desire can be a bondage. It can be binding. Bandham in Sanskrit it's called. And only when this bandham is broken, when this bondage is removed, then one gets moksha. Only then you get enlightened. And that, for that reason, it becomes an important topic about the desire. And this this word desire comes again and again in Gita. And we will talk about it in a minute. I'll explain more about that. And the way to get out of this bondage is by transcending. So Sthita Prajna is unshaken in the midst of sorrows. He's free from attachment, as we have just seen. So no attachment means one does not give undue attention to anything. One does not have undue fondness for anything. He gives right amount of attention to relationships, to possessions, etc. Also, Sthita Prajna is free from fear and anger. He's balanced and maintains equanimity. His senses are withdrawn. His senses are drawn in, like the tortoise example is given. This doesn't mean that you don't enjoy sense objects. You do. But what it means is that the divine value of Atma fills your mind, and then you begin to live this divinity on the sensory level. But even though you have that experience on the sensory level and, on a totally different level, sometimes the taste for the sense objects may persist. Say, like, you're not going to movies anymore because you don't care for it anymore. But every now and then the thought of that may come. But even that taste goes away when you see the supreme in Atma. You have the Atma experience, that is the supreme. And when you have that experience, and that happens in transcendence, even the taste for the sense objects ceases. And then the senses are under his control. The senses don't control him, but he controls the senses. And this comes spontaneously. So then he becomes Jitendriya, the Sanskrit word. That means the senses are under his control. But for someone who is not turned towards the divine, who does not have the control of the senses, what happens? The shloka describes, the 60th shloka. It says that such a person, he perishes. And the word, perishes, it seems harsh, but the way we understand is, we tell the non-meditators who are not turned towards the divine, because they're busy, so busy in the relative. We tell them that we decide what future we get. Man makes his destiny. We tell them it is the nature of the senses to carry away the mind from divine. They are taking you away from divine. So it is good to turn your attention inward towards the divine. And then you develop the steady state of intellect by going inward. And then you experience the benefits of that. So what happens with the steady state of intellect? He attains to grace. Grace means prasada, is the Sanskrit word used in the shloka. Prasada here means wholeness. This results from the experience of pure consciousness. This means that Paramatma is pleased with Sthita Prajna. Plus, he has Prasanna Cheta. That means he's pleasant, very pleasant. And he enjoys lasting peace and freedom from suffering. It's fun to be around these people. People get attracted to these kinds of people. They just want to sit around him. That's what people used to do, They used to go just sit around Maharishi. And the glory of Sthita Prajna is that such a person is in tune with natural law. Natural law means God. They're in tune with God. So if one does not have this steady intellect, then one cannot have peace, because the mind is going in all different directions. And when the mind and senses are going here and there, then there cannot be any peace. And if there is no peace, there can be no happiness. So, with the steady state of intellect, we get control of the senses, and being established in Atma, all desires are relinquished, and one is free from the sense of I and mine. So, in this state, even if there are any superficial desires, they enter him as waters enter the sea. And he attains to peace. The ocean always stays the same level, no matter how many rivers come and join the sea. So, in this state, this Sthita Prajna attains peace, he is self-sufficient, and he is affluent. What is affluence? Not having $1 million or $10 million. Affluence means infinite independence. That's a beautiful state to be. You don't depend on anything outside of you, or you don't depend on anything or anybody outside of you for your happiness. You get it from your own self, inner happiness you have. So you don't depend on anything or anybody. Isn't that a wonderful state to be in? You are so self-sufficient. It's an absolutely beautiful state to be in. And this kind of state is Brahmi Sthiti. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha. Nainam Prapya Vimuhyati. Once you reach this state, you're not deluded anymore. And this attaining Brahmi Sthiti, it happens in this lifetime. We don't think about next lifetime and the next lifetime. Maharishi said it happens in this lifetime. The only requirement is you have to do your program, that's all. And so once one reaches to that state, he breathes infinity. He has infinite flexibility, and he maintains Atma awareness or self-awareness in the midst of actions. He's doing all actions, doing everything, but stays calm inside. And once you reach that state, you don't fall back. And having reached this glorious state, a man's life is really the expression of divine life. Divine is found on the level of the individual, and he retains complete stillness at all times, always happy and peaceful, and he is eternally content. So this ends the description of Sthita Prajna. Very beautiful state, isn't it? And we all aspire for that, and we are getting there. Nobody should doubt that. So now I would like to make some, bring out some important points. And one question that keeps coming up, young people, children, they ask, why did Sri Krishna Bhagavan tell Arjuna to fight instead of telling him to meditate and get a group of 10,000 people together to create coherence and harmony between Kauravas and Pandavas? Legitimate question, isn't it? But the answer is like this. Whenever you have to make a decision about an action, what should I do? Sometimes you don't know what you should do, like Arjuna. Should I do it or not? And then the primary consideration should be, is this action right or wrong? If it is right, you should do it. Then it becomes a virtuous act. And if it is wrong, you should not do it, because you will incur sin by doing something that is wrong. And another important point to remember is that you don't think in terms of gain or loss. Even if you have to face difficulties or you have to lose something, you always do the right action. Even if you think it's going to be so hard, to do the right action, you want to do it. And Sri Rama going to Vanvas is the perfect example. He didn't say, oh, if I go to Vanvas, I have to walk without shoes and I don't get proper food, and all that. You just do it, even though it is a difficult situation. So what this means, you follow your dharma. When you follow your dharma, you are doing the right action. And if you are a king and your dharma is to protect your citizens, you should fight, not fearing that you may die in the battle. And a king will not tolerate any adharma. If the enemy is causing problem to your citizens, and that is adharma for the other king. So you have to face it. And if you just sit there and you don't do anything about it, it becomes cowardice, kayarta. So you don't tolerate adharma, you don't tolerate injustice done to your citizens. And so Arjuna had to fight because he had to destroy evil that was coming from Duryodhana and Kauravas. So that I hope everybody understand the value of the right action. So the next point I want to cover is desire, because sometimes it is misunderstood. It is true that desirelessness is a prerequisite for enlightenment. But this statement is true only when you transcend. In TM, when you transcend, you go beyond thought. There is no mantra, no thought, just silence. And this is a state of desirelessness. There is no desire there. Why? Because desire is a thought. And in transcendence, there is no thought. And so there is no desire. So you reach the state of desirelessness. So this is a requirement to grow in higher states of consciousness. You experience that state. But when you come out of that state, you come out into the relative. And in the relative, it's not possible to be without desires, even for enlightened people. Because even enlightened people, they eat and drink, they walk, they do good things, they work for world peace. All these are considered as desires. But these desires are on the superficial level. They're not going deep into their awareness. They're not deep-rooted. So they don't cause impressions. So that's the difference between superficial desires of enlightened people and the deep-rooted desires of some, people where they are, hung up on, many desires. And that's what we are trying to get away from. And whenever they say you should have desires and all that in Gita, that's what it means. Deep-rooted desires leading to greed and all those things which get you in trouble, which bring unhappiness to you. So it's important to understand the role played by desires in Bhagwat Geeta, whenever the word desire comes. Even in Brahma Sutras, it says, the very first sutras begins, the desire for Brahman is there. And only because of that, you want to read Brahma Sutra. So the desire is there. So any desire that is in accord with your dharma is okay. So that's about desire. And then we talked about control of senses. Control of senses comes spontaneously with regular practice of meditation. And spontaneously, the senses come under control because you have inner happiness and you are not, craving for outside pleasures and sense objects that much. But still, again, this doesn't mean that you don't enjoy sense objects, only you're not engrossed too much in, sense enjoyments. And if there are any habits that are difficult to control, like smoking or drinking, with the regular practice of TM, these go away because you get more happiness from transcending than from smoking or drinking. And so gradually these habits go away. So then what happens? Your senses are coming under control and you are the master of senses. So what that means is self-control and sense control is the result of enlightenment. When you're enlightened, all the senses are under your control automatically. And it is not right to think that you have to control your senses in order to be enlightened. That is not right thinking. That you're thinking backward. If you think like that, Maharishi said that you're putting the cart in front of the horses. You don't get anywhere with that. You have to put the horses in the front. So if you do it backwards, it doesn't work. So trying to control senses by external means is very difficult. We know that on the experience level. So I gave the example of monkey in one of the previous sessions. To control the monkey, which is running in all different directions, you just give the monkey a couple of bananas. You put the bananas in front of your house. The monkey will come running for the bananas. So now what's happening? You have control over the monkey. It's coming to you for bananas. So it is like that. So it is 8:45. I will stop here because we have discussed very many important points in second chapter. Now I would like to take questions. Anybody, any questions? Please go ahead. No questions? Okay.
Hemaji,
Yeah. Go
Hemaji,
ahead.
you've done so well. I don't think there's any question now. So
It's all
we
what
thought-
Maharishi said in the Gita. I just
yeah.
rephrased
Though I
it.
was thinking about the right action, but then later on you cleared it so beautifully so that I didn't have to ask.
Yeah.
So it is all right. Perfect. Thank you, Hemaji.
You're welcome. So there is something in the chat box. Manju Tiwari is saying, nicely explained. Thank you, Manjuji. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. So, Madhavi, what should we do now?
Shall we go in for a 5-minute short meditation and then go with the recitation of the
Yes, please. Yeah. And I notice Manishji Pandit
Yes.
is here. So 5-minute meditation, and then we will, Panditji will do the recitation for 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. So may I request everybody to be seated comfortably? We will have a short meditation for 5 minutes. Thank you. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev Manish ji. Can we have the chanting of chapter 2 from verses 37
जय
to
गुरु
70?
दीदी
The
जी
second
दीदी
half of the chapter, Manish ji, verses 37 to
जी दीदी
72. Thank you.
जी दीदी जी दीदी ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः सशंख चक्रम सखरीत कुंडलम सपीत वस्त्रम शिरसे क्षणम सहस्रवक्षस्थलकोस्त्रिवश्रियम् नमामि विष्णुं शिरसा चतुर्भुजं श्रीपरमात्मने नमः। अथ द्वितीयोऽध्यायः। ॐ हतो वा प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा भोक्ष्यसे महीम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चय सुखदुःखे समे कृत्वा लाभालाभौ जयाजयौ ततो युद्धाय युज्यस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये बुद्धिर्योगे त्विमां शृणु बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि नेहा विक्रमनाशोऽस्ति प्रत्यवायो न विद्यते स्वल्पमप्यस्य धर्मस्य त्रायते महतो भयात् व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिरेकेह कुरुनन्दन बहुशाखा ह्यनन्ताश्च बुद्ध्यो व्यवसायिनाम् यामिमां पुष्पितां वाचं प्रवदन्ति विपश्चितः वेदवादरतः पार्थ नान्यदस्तीति वादिनः कामात्मानः स्वर्गपरा जन्म कर्म फलप्रदां क्रिया विशेष बहुलां भोगेश्वर्य गतिं प्रति भोगेश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां तया प्रहत चेतसां व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धिः समाधौ न विधीयते त्रैगुण्य विषया वेदा निस्त्रैगुण्यो भवार्जुन निर्द्वन्द्वो नित्य सत्वस्थो निर्योगक्षेम आत्मवान् यावानर्थ उदपाने सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावान् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्राह्मणस्य विजानतः कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूर्मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि योगस्थः कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्ध्यसिद्ध्यो समो भूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते दूरेण ह्यवरं कर्म बुद्धियोगात् धनञ्जय बुद्धौ शरणमन्विच्छ कृपणा फलहेतवः बुद्धियुक्तो जहातीह उभे सुकृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगः कर्मसु कौशलम् कर्मजं बुद्धियुक्ता हि फलं त्यक्त्वा मनीषिणः जन्मबन्धविनिर्मुक्ताः पदं गच्छन्त्यनामयम् यदा ते मोहि कलिलं बुद्धिर्व्यतितरिष्यति तदा गन्तासि निर्वेदं श्रोतव्यस्य सुश्रुतस्य च श्रुतिविप्रतिपन्ना ते यदा स्थास्यति निश्चला समाधावचला बुद्धिस्तदा योग्यमवाप्स्यसि अर्जुन उवाच स्थितप्रज्ञस्य का भासा समाधिस्थस्य केशव स्थितधि किं प्रभाषेत किमासीत व्रजेत किं श्रीभगवान् उवाच प्रजहाति यदा कामान् सर्वान् पार्थमनोगतान् आत्मन्येवात्मनः तुष्टः स्थितप्रज्ञस्ततोच्यते दुःखेष्वनुद्विग्नमनः सुखेषु विगतस्पृहः वीतरागभयक्रोधः स्थितधीर्मुनिरुच्यते यः सर्वत्रानभ्यस्नेः तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नाभिनन्दति नात्वेष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता यदा संहरते चायं कूर्मोऽङ्गानीव सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता विषया विनिवर्तन्ते निराहारस्य देहिनः रसवर्जं रसोऽप्यस्य परं दृष्ट्वा निवर्तते यततो ह्यपि कौन्तेय पुरुषस्य विपश्चितः इन्द्रियाणि प्रमाथीनि हरन्ति प्रसभं मनः तानि सर्वाणि संयम्य युक्त आसीत् मत्परः वसहि यस्येन्द्रियाणि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषुपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् प्रशमितभ्रमः क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यते रागद्वेषवियुक्तेस्तु विषयानिन्द्रियैश्चरन् आत्मवश्यर्विधेयात्मा प्रसादमधिगच्छति प्रसादे सर्वदुःखानां हानिरस्योपजायते प्रसन्नचेतसो ह्याशु बुद्धिः पर्यवतिष्ठते नास्ति बुद्धिरयुक्तस्य न चायुक्तस्य भावना न चाभावयतः शान्तिरशान्तस्य कुतः सुखम् इन्द्रियाणां हि चरतां यन्मनोनुविधीयते तदस्य हरति प्रज्ञां वायुर्नावमिमां वशे समाध्यस्य महाबाहो जगृहीतानि सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणेन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता या निशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यां जागृति संयमे यस्यां जागृति भूतानि सा निशा पश्यतो मुने अपूर्यमाना मचलप्रतिष्ठं समुद्रमापः प्रवसन्ति यतवत् तत्वत्य कामायं प्रवसन्ति सर्वे सशान्तिमाप्नोति न कामकामी विहाय कामान्यः सर्वान् पुमाश्चरति निःस्पृहः निर्ममो निरहङ्कार सशान्तिमधिगच्छति एषा ब्राह्मस्थितिः पार्थ नैनां प्राप्य विमुह्यते स्थित्वा स्यामन्त्यकालेऽपि ब्रह्मनिर्वाणमृच्छते ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे सांख्ययोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः। श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु। ओम जय गुरुदेव।
मनीष जी, मुकेश जी और
जी दीदी।
घनश्याम जी नहीं आए?
जी दीदी थोड़े वो बाहर चले गए थे।
अच्छा।
और मुकेश जी दीदी घर गए हैं।
हाँ, तो हम मुकेश जी से अनुरोध किए थे कि विवाह आशीर्वाद देना आपको। मनीष जी बधाई हो।
आपका आशीर्वाद मिल गया, हमको मिल गया।
हाँ, तो our very dear Manish Pandit ji, he got married on 1st of June. Is that right? पहली तारीख को हुआ ना आपकी विवाह?
दीदी
तो
नहीं,
that is
5 दीदी 5 जून।
हाँ, so
5 जून
5th June. तो बधाई हो आपको।
जी।
भगवान के आशीर्वाद हमेशा मिले. Let us, all of us, I wish we had somebody sing, Ashirwad for you, but maybe, next week or something, one other Pandit can sing. So hearty congratulations on behalf of all of our Gita group, Manish ji.
क्या?
So can you do Shanti part now? And we will end with the Shanti part.
दीदी हरि ओम माधो शांतिरंतरिक्षकुं शांतिः पृथिवी शांतिरापः शांतिरोषधयः शांतिः वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्विश्वे देवाः शांति ब्रह्म शांतिः सर्वगुं शांतिः शांतिरेव शांतिः सामा शांतिरेधि जतो यतः समेहसे ततो नो अभयं कुरु सन्नः कुरु प्रजाभ्यो भयन्नः पाशुभियः। ओम शांति शांति शांति। जय गुरुदेव।
Jai Gurudev. So all can come on cameras and unmute your audios. Thank you all for joining. Jai Gurudev Bani. Jai Gurudev Bela. And Manju Tiwari, so glad you are able to join us today. And Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, ma'am.
Yeah, Jai Gurudev Bela. Sorry, Bela, today no Hindi. I just didn't have any time to prepare in Hindi, and the second chapter is so big, so I couldn't do it. And Manju ji,
Jai Gurudev.
You're welcome. And Jai Gurudev to Anne, and Jai Gurudev to Happy Girl, and Pooja was there and she left. Okay, so nice seeing you all. We'll meet next Friday, and we will begin chapter 3. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. So I will end the
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. So I'll end the
Jai Gurudev Didi.
Jai Gurudev Manish ji.